You guys ready? Darkness can't drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Just as hate can't drive out hate. Only love can do that. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. was and is a huge and important historical figure concerning the civil rights movement in America. He inspired millions to stand up and fight against the inequality of black people. During his fight, he had some major setbacks. In 1963, he was taken into custody by the Birmingham, Alabama Police Department. This led him to write an inspiring letter on the treatment of African Americans and segregation. I will explain why he wrote this letter, how he wrote this letter, and what effect it had on the civil rights movement and America today. Martin Luther King was not arrested for robbing a bank or committing tax fraud or murder. He was arrested because he and many others were protesting and marching against racial segregation. They were marching in response to a statement called the Call to Unity. This was issued by a number of Birmingham clergymen. A call to unity stated that it was wrong of King to protest and demonstrate in the streets as he had been doing. This peaceful demonstrations angered the community. A circuit judge named W.A. Jenkins issued a blanket injunction against any kind of protesting, parading, demonstrating, or boycotting. This injunction gave the police department the right to arrest and detain King. King had been fighting for desegregation and the correct treatment of black people for years, but this was his first time being arrested for his acts. In his letter, King explains why the movement can no longer wait. He says, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The Negro's great stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate, who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will." King and many others were tired of being told to calm down or to wait, and they simply couldn't anymore. But writing this letter was a challenging task all within itself. Martin Luther King spent 11 days in a tiny jail cell with barely any food or water. In the letter, he actually apologizes for it being so long because he had nothing else to do. The letter is 9 pages of heart-wrenching stories, heartfelt feelings, and thoughts. He shares a personal story about how his little girl was so disappointed because he had to tell her that she couldn't go to the amusement park that was just on the TV because it was still segregated. Sometimes he wrote on toilet paper, walls, whatever he could get his hands on, really. And still, I think it's the most beautiful and well-worded essay I have ever read. I urge you to read it following the speech. His words were hard to hear for some, but they surely had an impact. The letter was published in the New York Post and later in King's book, Why We Can't Wait. It was and is incredibly popular and has been quoted for years and years to come. After the letter, many were inspired, even those who struggled with the topic. It forced the mind of even the most stubborn to open ever so slightly. Protests grew bigger, and the number of people partaking in the civil rights movement reached an all-time high. This letter still has a huge impact on America today. It influenced a gigantic social movement. His words are still used in the fight against hate. Martin Luther King left us with an amazing legacy and changed the world. I will end with the words that ended his letter. "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities, and in some not-too-distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." Thank you.
I wish I could whistle.